What's up, guys? In today's video I'm going to show you how to connect GraphQL and Feathersjs. Now before I go into too much of how it's going to work, I want to first just set up our project because it's going to take a second to generate. So the first thing is go to the command line and create a folder. I'm going to call mine Taco Apollo and just go inside of it and then do feathers generate. This set up a new Feathersjs project. I'm going to keep the default name, description. You can do all the defaults. We'll do the NEDB for now. That's easy to set up. So what's going on is, if you haven't seen, I'll just show you real quick. GraphQL is a library that Facebook came out with. I believe Facebook came out with. If not, it came they help with the open source project. It's a new query language. It kind of sits in between your server and making API calls. As a client, you'll make an API call, and then the GraphQL will then make all the API calls on the server for you. As you can see, this is what the syntax looks like right here, and it gives you back JSON. It's a new way to parse stuff, and it's pretty cool to do. And what you can actually do is set it up with feathers, and it works quite nicely. And I really like using this for projects. So this is still downloading. We'll let it finish. When it is finished, we're going to install two more, actually maybe three more libraries to finish this off. We're going to need to install Apollo server, GraphQL, and GraphQL tools. Okay, so we finished downloading. Just exit. And then right here, before I even actually install, I'm just going to open up my package.json. I want to configure two things. The first is I want to use some new features in this. So I'm going to add Babel. Babel. This will allow me to use the newer JavaScript syntax. Presets. And we'll do ES 2015. Okay. And then here, do Babel node instead of just node in these scripts. If you don't have that, just do npm install global Babel node and Babel if that doesn't work for you when you do npm start later. Okay, but the files we're going to need is npm install save. We're going to need Apollo server. We're also going to need GraphQL and GraphQL tools. GraphQL, we're going to have to install a specific version, which we're about to see when we install Apollo server. It's like version 7 or something, and it specifically looks for it. This right here. So npm install save GraphQL at 0.7.0. So that's why I'm installing it second, because it was specifically asking for something. Okay. So that's all set up. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to generate a service. So this is going to be the service that is going to act for our GraphQL. So I'm just going to call it GraphQL. It's a generic one, and it does not need authentication. We'll just exit out of that. And let's go right into it. Go into source, services, then go to GraphQL, and then index. So if you didn't follow, let me just make sure you follow the path. We're in source, services, and then GraphQL. Go ahead and open up index, and you can actually get rid of all this stuff. We're going to redo this whole thing and set up basically the GraphQL server here. You can keep the require hooks, that's fine. So we're going to import Apollo Express and GraphIQL Express from Apollo server, and import make executable schema and add mock functions to schema from GraphQL tools. and then we're going to import resolvers, and this is something we're going to be creating. Resolvers, and then we're also going to need a schema for our GraphQL, and we'll be making that as well. Okay, so modules.export, and we're going to have a function. And then here we can do const app is equal to this. And then we're going to do app.use, and we're going to make two routes. First is GraphQL. And this is where you can actually post to GraphQL, and you can access it through a client. Apollo Express. Just do that. So we're just creating this route, and then we're going to call this Express. We're just setting up the server for the GraphQL server here, and then we're going to get the, we don't have to worry about any kind of authentication in this app for now. We're just going to return schema is equal to executable schema. Okay. And then down here, we actually need to set up the executable schema. Forgot about that. To do const executable schema is equal to make executable schema. And this is just taking, we'll be setting this up in a second here. Type defs schema, and then resolvers dot call app. Okay, so this is just telling GraphQL what our schema is going to be and what to do, what functions to call. All right, that's set up. We can actually get rid of this comma at the end here. The second route we want to do is to actually play around with this. You don't actually want this in production, but for testing it's good. It's the interactive little shell, or not shell, but little GUI that they have that GraphQL gives you. And this just allows you to query the database and test out all your different stuff. Okay, and then we just have to tell it where to actually make the calls to GraphQL, and that's our endpoint right here. Okay, so we just set up the index page. The next thing is we want to make these resolvers that we are importing. So resolvers, and this is in the same folder, resolvers.js, and we're going to be creating a function, export default function resolvers, let app equal this. And now actually, you know what, I think it'll be better if we make the schema first, so that'll make more sense what our resolvers are going to be. So let's hop to schema real quick. So we're going to create in the same folder, schema.js. In this, we're actually just going to make our schema type definitions. We're going to just make our schema as a string. So export default type definitions. And then inside here, we'll just make some type definitions that we want to set up. Now for this example, we're going to be setting up a taco service. So we're going to create a type called taco. It's going to have an ID, which is a string, and then it's going to have meat, which is also a string, cheese, which is also a string, and then salsa, which is also a string. And then we're going to create a type, another type, the root query, and we'll have tacos, and this you can query based on the meat string, and we'll say this is required, and it's going to return a list of tacos. We can get a specific taco by you passing in the ID, and that will return just one taco. And then we can also create one more, all tacos, which will return, again, a list of tacos. So that's our one type that we'll be querying from. Now we want to be able to create tacos. I'm going to create a type called create taco in the root mutation. So create taco, passing in meat, and we'll say that one's required, but we don't need to have cheese. We'll say leave that unrequired, and salsa is unrequired. And this is going to return, of course, a taco. And at the bottom here, just set our schema, which is going to have a query as root query, and then the mutation as root mutation. Okay, so this is our schema right here. We have one type of taco. We can create tacos, and then we can query different tacos using our root query. Okay, so let's go into the resolvers and actually make those functions that we just did there. Okay, so to handle this, we're gonna first create our tacos service, app.service tacos, and this is a service that we're gonna be creating. And actually, let's create that service right now real quick. So it's very important when you're creating the service to go back up to the root folder. So you'll notice I have the package.json, and then do feathers generate service, because for some reason when you do feathers generate service, if you're in a different folder, it will generate it there. It's kind of local, which is kind of annoying. So I'm going to call this taco. It's going to use a database, and it's going to use the NEDB, and no authentication. Okay, exit out of that. Okay, so our service is set up. Now I'm going to go back into the source, services, GraphQL, and now we're going to finish up our resolver. Okay, so we have our service. We're going to just return, and inside this return statement, we're going to be creating some properties that are going to be used by the root query, and then also the root mutation. And just put a comma there. We'll start with the root query. Inside here, we gave two types of queries, or actually three types of queries. We could do all tacos, pass in the root, and this took no parameters here, so these are just empty arguments, and then also the context. And what we want to return is just tacos.find, and then we want to find basically all the tacos, so we're not going to pass any parameters to find. And that's it. That implements find all tacos. It's that easy. Now we're going to do tacos, which what we're looking for is we're going to pass in a meat, so we will grab meat from the passed in, this is again the parameter, from the context, and we're going to return return tacos.find, and this time we're going to use the query parameter, meat, and what this will do is it'll go and find all tacos that have the same meat. Alright, and then we'll create one last one called taco root, and we gave it an ID parameter, and this allows us to just go get the taco with that ID. And that's all our root query. It's all done already. It's very easy to implement these in Feathers. So next we'll do create taco for our root mutation, passing in root, and then the data to create it, and then context. We don't have to break down this data. We could also do like meat, cheese, salsa, but we're gonna pass in the whole object back into the create function. So you can just say data and then do return tacos.create data, and you have to pass in the context here. Okay, now our resolver's done, our schema's done, and the whole GraphQL service is done. But there's a couple things we have to make sure that are correct before we can actually use the interactive prompt that we made. If we go over, I'm just going to start the server, so npm start. I'm just going to make sure this starts okay. We'll just leave that in the background for now. It could take a second. But what's important to do is to go into the services folder and look for one called index. And you'll see all these things configured. Now it's important, you see how GraphQL is above Taco? We need GraphQL at the bottom. Because if we need to configure Taco first, because we use this Taco service in our GraphQL. If we had GraphQL up here, GraphQL doesn't know about Taco and cannot use Taco in the resolvers, and so it causes an error. So make sure GraphQL is on the bottom in this index file. Second thing, if you go to the Taco service, so this is under services, Taco, and then index, you'll see it has a paginate right here. Remove that. That gives you problems when you're trying to get all the tacos, and it only gives you a page of tacos, and it doesn't play nice with GraphQL. So just remove that. And doing those two things, we should be good. Let's see what this is not liking. We could have done a small, it looks like we did a little error. You see, notice it's pushed up there. I'm just going to run Babel myself. Okay, move up one more file. So Babel node, and call it on the source, and let's see what the problem is. Oh, and it just looks like there's a syntax error. So if you open up GraphQL and then an index, I just put a semicolon here, and it should not be there. And so if you guys didn't see that, I did that pretty quick. In GraphQL index down here, the endpoint URL should not be a semicolon at the end. That was incorrect JSON. Second thing, oh, it looks like I have something messed up in my schema. So let's go to the schema real quick. So that was in GraphQL and then the schema. Oh, it was create taco. Create taco needs to be parentheses, not what's it called? Curly braces. My fault. Restart, run the server again, and it looks like it started successfully, getting rid of those little errors. So now if you go to localhost 3030/GraphIQL, you should see the little thing that allow you to call GraphQL things. If you've never used this before, it's pretty cool. I'll show you some of the things you can do with it. So we can do mutation, and then we can create a taco. So to create a taco, we're just going to pass in the parameters, meat. So let's say I want some chicken on my taco, cheese, I would like cheddar, and salsa, I would like spicy. And if we hit run, you'll notice it'll return back this object, and it'll create the taco for us. Now notice this right here, this tells you what's going to be returned back. So for example, if I just want to know the meat, it still makes an object of taco with all these properties, but it only returns back to me that. So we can create a couple different ones. So instead of cheddar, maybe I want Parmesan because I'm weird. And then maybe here I'll have some mild salsa. And here maybe I don't want chicken, I want beef. Let's create another one with tofu. So we have a couple tacos in our database. We can now get rid of this, and we can start querying it. So we did all tacos, and let's just bam, run that. And we get all the tacos in our database right here. So you can see I made a bunch of tacos. We can also query it in different ways. We could do the tacos passing in the meat. Let's see, I'm feeling vegetarian today. Just give me those tofu tacos. Bam. Just give me only the tacos that have tofu as the meat. I can do chicken here, and it would query the chickens. And then let's try our last one where we pass in an ID. So let's copy the ID of one of them. And then we can do taco, passing in the ID. And that's a string. So wrap it in quotes. And oops, taco is not defined. Okay, so this is an error we just found. So okay, notice this is not a good return. This is a problem with our feathers code. So let's go into our feathers code and see what's wrong. So it said taco is not defined. I think it's going to be somewhere in our resolvers. So if I just go GraphQL and then resolvers, tacos.create, it'll be okay here. So I call it taco, it should be tacos. So make sure you change that, go to GraphQL and then our resolvers, and then restart the server. And then I'm just going to restart the page and then run it. Okay, and we were able to get the taco by just grabbing by the ID. So that is how you set up a GraphQL server with Feathersjs. It's not too bad, and it allows you to easily combine a lot of services. Now I'm just using one service in this to show you and demonstrate how this is set up. If you would like to see a video with how to set this up with multiple services and querying from several different in a more large scale application, possibly maybe you want to see some authentication, leave a comment below and let me know if you want to see more stuff using GraphQL and Feathers.js. So thank you so much for watching.